Popped up a long time ago during the Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill hearings, if I remember.
That's correct.
And
During that time, I worked for Senator Kennedy. I was the chief investigator for the Senate Committee and the Labor Committee. And I worked on the Clarence Thomas nomination.
Now, you've come to this job with a background in politics. Where have you worked?
Most recently, I worked in the White House immediately before I came to the job.
For Bill Clinton?
For Bill Clinton. And we don't have members or chapters. We work with a really broad range of people and organizations around the country. And a lot of what we do has been focused on communications and the media. We make public service announcements.
What is a lawyer like you doing work like this?
Well, the thing about my being a lawyer is I have to admit I've never practiced law in the traditional sense. What I've done is I've worked a lot on civil liberties and civil rights issues and policy, public policy issues and advocacy.
Christine Blasey Ford, the woman who has accused Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh of sexually assaulting her when they were both teenagers, is being advised by Democratic operative Ricki Seidman. Seidman, a senior principal at TSD Communications, in the past worked as an investigator for Senator Ted Kennedy and was involved with Anita Hill's decision to testify against Supreme Court nominee Clarence Thomas. "I believe her, and I think she's very courageous for coming this far," Seidman said in a brief interview confirming her role advising Ford. She also worked as Joe Biden's communications director during the 2008 general election campaign, after he was named Barack Obama's running mate. In 2009, according to her online biography, she helped the White House manage the confirmation of Obama's Supreme Court nominee Sonia Sotomayor. Before that, she worked in the Clinton White House as deputy communications director. Democratic operatives in Washington, D.C. have been cautious about linking Ford and her claims to parties and activists working on her behalf over concerns about further politicizing an already complicated case. Ford didn't come at this through any one political and needs to keep her distance from it, said one Democratic operative. Seidman was brought in to offer personal advice to Ford, a California-based psychologist who has no experience living in the spotlight of a national story or in the crosswinds of Washington politics. It is not yet clear whether Ford plans to testify in front of Congress. A source familiar with her thinking said she is still making up her mind. Her attorney Deborah Katz has said she wants to wait until the FBI completes its investigation into her claims. But Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley has given Ford a Friday deadline to submit her testimony. For now, Ford is not actively preparing for what would be a high-stakes public testimony akin to Hill's hearings during Thomas' confirmation, which gripped the entire country almost 30 years ago, according to a person familiar with her activities this week. While Kavanaugh has been huddling with a team at the White House every day for the past week, a source familiar with Ford's prep said she has not been participating in moot hearings or other mock proceedings. Even though Democrats have purposefully proceeded cautiously with Ford, the news that she is working with an experienced political operative was interpreted by Republicans close to the process as a sign that Democrats are trying to leverage the accusation to derail the Kavanaugh confirmation process. "This feels more like a Democratic super PAC than a legal effort to get at the truth," said a senior Republican official of Seidman's role working with Ford. "If you're concerned about an appearance of partisanship, hiring a Democratic operative with a history of smearing conservative judges doesn't exactly mitigate that," said Cassie Smedile, press secretary for the Republican National Committee. Seidman says she does not currently do political work. As many conservatives have believed from the beginning, Christine Blasey Ford's accusations against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh seem to be nothing more than a manufactured effort by the left to derail the judge's confirmation. Now, we have evidence that the Democrats were plotting something all along. Ever since Senator Dianne Feinstein revealed that she had received a letter from Ford accusing Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh of attempted rape 36 years ago, we have been asking why the allegations were not brought forward sooner. Why did Dr. Ford wait until Kavanaugh was nominated to the Supreme Court by President Donald Trump to make her claims? And why did Senator Feinstein hold on to Ford's letter for 6 weeks before making it public on the eve of Kavanaugh's confirmation, when she had so many opportunities to address it before then? Now, we have our answer. In a July conference call to Democratic leaders, Ricki Seidman, a high-powered Democratic operative, former Clinton White House official, and current advisor to Blasey Ford, laid out a strategy to defeat the nomination of Judge Brett Kavanaugh. Over the coming days and weeks there will be a strategy that will emerge, and I think it's possible that that strategy might ultimately defeat the nominee, Seidman said on the call. This was at the same time as Blasey Ford sent her letter accusing Kavanaugh of attempted rape to Senator Dianne Feinstein. The Democrats knew all along that there was no way for them to legitimately defeat Kavanaugh. If they wanted to derail his confirmation, they would have to resort to dirty tactics much the same way they did with Anita Hill during Justice Clarence Thomas' confirmation. Sadly, this is nothing new. The Democrats are becoming like the boy who cried wolf, only in this case it's more like the random chick who cried sexual harassment at the 11th hour.
Kavanaugh says he will be there to testify first thing Monday morning, but as far as his accuser goes, the signals have remained mixed tonight. In fact, just moments ago, I was looking at something that says that they're still in discussions. They're still trying to get the parameters down for how this would work next week. Here now, Ben Shapiro, editor-in-chief of DailyWire.com and the host of the Ben Shapiro Election Special, which starts this Sunday at 8 o'clock Eastern, right here on the Fox News channel, which we are all looking forward to having Ben with us through the midterm. Ben, good to see you tonight. Thank you very much for being here.
Good to see you.
I know you talked a lot on your podcast yesterday, about what you see as a lot of injustice that feels inherent in this. In terms of how this whole thing has been approached. And there's a lot of questions that are being raised tonight about who might have sort of jumped into the fray to help this woman and to get involved in her case and what their motivations might be. And there's a story by Politico later this afternoon which suggested that a woman named Ricki Seidman is advising her, and of course she's allowed to have anybody she wants advise her. It's a free country, but it is interesting to note that Ricki Seidman also helped someone else.
Well, I mean, obviously, there's a political attempt here. I mean, the fact that the accuser is now going to a woman who was working with Anita Hill in the Clarence Thomas trial doesn't speak highly of the sort of nonpartisan element in this whole case. And that's what's been so troubling. Whether you believe the accuser, whether you don't believe the accuser, the Democrats have made it nearly impossible to just look at this as a question of guilt or innocence. It looks like a political smear. There's just no way around it. The way that Dianne Feinstein handled this, she first saw a letter July 30th. She didn't reveal it to anyone else for 6 weeks. And then finally they come forward 2 days after Brett Kavanaugh finally finishes his hearing, 7 days afterward. That's when we finally hear the entire story. When she first referred the story, she didn't actually give the name of the accuser. She didn't give what actually happened. The accuser still can't give a date or a time as to when this happens. Makes it incredibly difficult for Brett Kavanaugh to even defend himself. And meanwhile, you got Democrats saying, well, we want to hear her story. And then the minute Republicans say, well, why don't you just bring her, like in front of our committee so we can hear her story, then Democrats say, hey, that's sexist. It's sexist to want to hear her story. So if they don't hear her story, it's sexism and silencing her. If they do hear her story, it's sexism and silencing her.
And somehow they're bullying her.
Right. And then they throw it in front of the FBI, as though the FBI is some sort of magic time cop.
They've offered her, a private, anything she wants, really. However she wants to convey her information. They've said they'll go to California. They want to make it as open and accessible a process for her as they can. And they're in those negotiations tonight. I'm just shocked, sort of given the history that we've seen in these cases. And, you've pointed out and I've pointed out, we don't know what happened. Nobody knows what happened in this case. And, obviously that's the most important underlying factor of what's going on here. But I'm shocked when you look back at like the Duke case or the UVA case and some of these cases that have unraveled, that people are so willing to jump in with their opinion, not knowing her or not knowing anything about the actual facts.
And Mike Gardner says that she's not credible. Who the hell cares what a bunch of celebrities who weren't in the room and haven't been anywhere near that side of the country for a while have to say about what happened here? I mean, what exactly light do they have to shed on any of this? It gets even more absurd than that. We've seen 2 interviews in the last 48 hours from people who were in classes with Blasey Ford when she was back in high school, saying they believe her story. And then when specifically asked whether they actually heard about this, they say no. Do they know anything about Brett Kavanaugh? No. But they believe her story because bad things happened to them. Well, that's not a standard as to whether you know something bad happened in this case. The idea that justice, truth, and guilt and innocence, that these things can be decided simply by appeal to men are bad and women must always be believed, it's absurd. You have to have some standard of evidence before you destroy a man's life. You at least have to give him the chance to defend himself. Democrats are now saying things like, if he even defends himself, he's insulting the woman. Anna Marie Cox, over at Wonkedon on MSNBC, she suggested that it doesn't really matter whether Brett Kavanaugh is guilty or innocent. What really matters is whether he feels this woman's pain. Yeah. Well, if you're Brett Kavanaugh and a woman just accused you, in your opinion, of sexually assaulting you falsely, sexually assaulting her falsely, are you really going to be sitting there thinking about her level of pain? Or are you going to be thinking, I need to defend myself. I have daughters. I have a wife. I have a life. This is all insanity. And again, it's demonstrative of the fact that if we really wanted to get to the truth of the situation, if Democrats really gave one crap about this, what Democrats would be doing is putting this woman in front of a hearing, calling whatever witnesses they could, and then they would be attempting to bolster her case. They wouldn't be hiding her and then suggesting that any questions to be asked are somehow undermining the justice system.
Ben, thank you. We'll look forward to seeing you on Sunday night. Good to see you.
Thanks so much.